Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Sudan's warring factions say they've agreed to a 24-hour ceasefire after 4 days of violence plunged the Northeast African nation into chaos. A United Nations envoy says the civilian death toll in Sudan has reached at least 185, with more than 1,800 people wounded since fighting between rival wings of the military junta erupted Saturday. The true toll is likely far higher, with emergency crews unable to retrieve bodies from the streets of the capital, Khartoum, where tanks, fighter jets, and artillery fire struck densely populated urban areas. In a widely shared social media post, architect and Khartoum resident Tagreed Abdin said Monday civilians were being killed in the crossfire and that the fighting could benefit Islamist groups in Sudan.
My only fear is that they come back to power on the back of whoever wins this idiocy, this ridiculous battle that has civilians caught in the middle. And we have nothing to do with this. I don't have a preference. It's like, just, this is our new normal now.
More than a dozen hospitals have been shut down across Sudan, some of them after sustaining bomb damage. Humanitarian aid groups have suspended their operations. U.S. embassy officials have been sheltering in place after a U.S. diplomatic convoy came under attack Monday. Meanwhile, the European Union ambassador to Sudan reports he was assaulted in his residence in Khartoum. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly condemned the fighting and appealed to the warring factions to cease hostilities and begin a dialogue to resolve the crisis. In Kansas City, Missouri, a white 84-year-old homeowner was charged with 2 felonies Monday after he shot and critically injured a black teenager who rang his doorbell by mistake. Police say the homeowner, Andrew Lester, did not exchange words with Ralph Yarl last Thursday before opening fire through a locked glass door with a .32 caliber revolver, hitting the 16-year-old twice in the head and the chest. Yarl underwent surgery to remove bullet fragments and released from the hospital Sunday to recover at home. Lester walked free for several days before his arrest. Clay County prosecutor Zachary Thompson announced the charges Monday before taking questions from reporters.
Was there a racial component to this case, however?
As the prosecutor at Clay County, I can tell you there was a racial component to the case.
The 16-year-old Ralph Yarl had simply rung the doorbell of the wrong address to pick up his 2 younger brothers. A grand jury in Akron, Ohio, has decided not to bring criminal charges against 8 police officers who fatally shot Jalen Walker, a 25-year-old black man, after a traffic stop last June. Body camera video shows the officers chasing Walker after he got out of his car and was running away unarmed. An autopsy later revealed Walker was struck by 46 police bullets as he fled. Lawyers for the Walker family say that after the officers shot Jalen, they handcuffed him before administering first aid. Elizabeth Page White is an attorney for the Walker family.
I don't care what he did. But let's be clear, when Jalen was shot, he was running away, he was unarmed. Those are 2 things that we know. And for any state official to stand up there and justify what was done to Jalen, shame on you. Shame on each and every one of you. What we saw happen this week in the grand jury was a miscarriage of justice.
In Indianapolis, 2 police officers have been indicted over the killing of Herman Whitfield nearly a year ago. Whitfield was an award-winning African-American piano virtuoso who would have turned 40 last October. Last April, his parents called 911 to ask for help as their son experienced a mental health crisis in their home. Officers responded with deadly force, pinning Herman Whitfield to the ground, cuffing him, tasering him, and continuing to press their weight into him, even though he was crying out he could not breathe. The city of Indianapolis and its police department fought for months to block a judge's order that raw videos of Whitfield's killing be made public. Last Friday, officers Steven Sanchez and Adam Ahmad pleaded not guilty to charges of manslaughter, reckless homicide, and battery. They were released on $15,000 bond. A trial for both officers is scheduled to begin in June. Police in New Mexico have released body camera footage showing how officers shot and killed a Farmington resident in his own home on April 5th. The video shows officers repeatedly knocking on a door before realizing they'd come to the wrong address. Seconds later, 52-year-old Robert Dotson appears at his front door holding what appears to be a handgun. 3 officers immediately opened fire, killing Dotson. The officers then exchanged gunfire with Dotson's wife, who cried out for help. The officers, who have not been publicly identified, have been placed on paid leave pending a state police investigation. Florida is on the verge of joining Alabama as the only state in the country where a divided jury can impose the death penalty. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to sign legislation this week that would allow defendants to be sentenced to death even if as many as 4 members of a 12-person jury oppose the decision. Momentum for the legislation grew after the Parkland school shooter was sentenced to life in prison because the jury did not reach a unanimous decision on a death sentence. In other Florida news, Governor DeSantis is escalating his attacks on Disney as part of an ongoing dispute that began when the company criticized Florida's Don't Say Gay law. On Monday, DeSantis threatened to build a prison on state-owned land next to Disney World.
Well, what should we do with this land? And so, it's like, okay, kids, people have said, maybe have maybe create a state park, maybe try to do more amusement parks. Someone even said, maybe you need another state prison. Who knows?
Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has proposed increasing the debt ceiling for 1 year in exchange for sweeping budget cuts that would likely result in less federal money for housing, education, health care, and environment. McCarthy also pushed for tougher work requirements for recipients of SNAP, that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and to expand domestic mining and fossil fuel production. McCarthy outlined his plan in a speech at the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street.
Before we borrow another dime, we owe it to our children to save money everywhere. Our proposal will examine wasteful Washington spending and executive overreach in all forms.
The White House slammed Speaker McCarthy's proposal, warning it would impose devastating cuts on families and take health care and food assistance away from millions of people. The Republican-led House Judiciary Committee, led by Jim Jordan, held a field hearing in New York City, where Republicans repeatedly attacked Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, claiming the DA pushed, quote, pro-crime, anti-victim policies. The hearing came just weeks after Bragg filed criminal charges against Donald Trump. The focus of the hearing was on what Republicans described as violent crime in New York, even though it's one of the safest large cities in the United States. The New York Daily News reports the homicide rate in Ohio, the home state of committee chair Jim Jordan, is 73% higher than the homicide rate in Manhattan. This is committee chair Jim Jordan.
Their stories are emblematic of a city that's lost its way when it comes to fighting a crime and upholding the law.
Democratic Congressmember Jerry Nadler of New York blasted Jim Jordan for holding the hearing in New York and for attacking DA Alvin Bragg.
The chairman is doing the bidding of Donald Trump. Committee Republicans designed this hearing to intimidate and deter the duly elected district attorney of Manhattan from doing the work his constituents elected him to do. They have demanded access to the inner workings of an ongoing criminal case, information to which they know they are not entitled. They have perpetuated the anti-Semitic and racist tropes that Mr. Trump has directed at both the prosecutor and the judge in this case. They are using their public offices and the resources of this committee to protect their political patron, Donald Trump. It is an outrageous abuse of power.
In other congressional news in New York, Republican George Santos has announced he will seek re-election for Congress in 2024, despite growing calls for him to resign over his extensive lies about his background during his successful 2022 campaign. The FBI has arrested 2 New York residents for allegedly running a covert police station in Manhattan's Chinatown on behalf of the Chinese government. U.S. Attorney Breon Peace announced the indictment Monday, saying the site was operated by China's Ministry of Public Security to target pro-democracy activists and other Chinese dissidents in the U.S.
On at least one occasion, an official with the Chinese National Police directed one of the defendants, a U.S. citizen who worked at the secret police station, to help locate a pro-democracy activist of Chinese descent living in California. In other words, the Chinese National Police appear to have been using the station to track a U.S. resident on U.S. soil.
China's foreign ministry denied the charges and accused the United States of groundless accusations. A Russian judge in Moscow has denied bail to detained Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was arrested on espionage charges March 29th. During his first court appearance, Gershkovich was held in a glass metal enclosure. He was seen smiling at times, but marks from his handcuffs could be seen on his wrists. If convicted, he faces 20 years, up to 20 years in prison. The U.S. ambassador to Russia recently visited him in his Moscow jail, reporting he's in good health and remains strong. And in New Jersey, climate activists held a nonviolent civil disobedience protest Monday at the construction site of a fracked gas expansion project. If completed, the East 300 upgrade project would expand the flow of methane through Kinder Morgan's aging Tennessee gas pipeline. Among those detained by police at Monday's protest was Paula Rogovin, a longtime environmentalist and peace activist who called on New Jersey's Democratic Governor Phil Murphy to cancel the project.
Governor Murphy! You promised environmental justice. You promised clean air, clean water. And what do? You allow this lousy compressor station to be built. You allow pipelines.
You're under arrest. Come on.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.